Hungry and I could use a beer. We stopped at home and I walked in the door and looked around at our studio apartment. I gazed at our picture window with 1920s molding, looking out to the downtown neighborhood and park across the street. I studied our kitchen with cool, vintage black and white tiles. I looked at our bathroom and the clawfoot bathtub. I stared at our living room, where we spent countless nights hanging out with our close friends. Suddenly, the apartment seemed to spin. I felt nauseous. I loved our apartment and the Northwest quintessential evergreen trees. I wasn't ready to leave, but I didn't know what else I could do to find a job or convince Jason to stay. Our other friends from work told us they decided to use unemployment benefits until they got a job. Jason's parents balked at that and said they were lazy. They made it clear that should not be an option for us and shamed our friends. His parents also tried to convince me to get on board with us living in Vegas because it made Jason so happy. My parents, though, were supportive of any decision I made. I looked at Jason and he seemed concerned, yet still excited. I admired his positivity, but at that moment, it wasn't appeasing me. I went in the bathroom and threw up. I felt stuck. After a few minutes of heaving, I took some deep breaths, cleaned myself up, and re entered the rest of the apartment. Jason asked if I was okay. Without pausing for a response, he told me a friend was meeting us to celebrate, so we should go and not keep him waiting. My moment of reflection and panic expired. I put on my best quote unquote happy face. We had dinner, and the whole time, Jason and Clint talked about how great Vegas was. Clint also worked at Travelco, but had decided to stay in the Northwest. He was more than happy to help Jason convince me to go with him, though. It was November, so it was about 45 degrees Fahrenheit, cold and rainy. This was the typical Northwest weather I knew I could expect until March. Jason showed me the Vegas weather report. It was 70 degrees and sunny. As freezing cold as I had been feeling lately, that sounded nice. They reminded me that most places have pools there, so we could swim and enjoy the weather year round. They reminded me of Cirque du Soleil shows and all the entertainment in Vegas. They reminded me how inexpensive it was to live there, so we could easily have enough money to get a two-bedroom apartment to host family and friends and still have enough to frequently fly home to see them. Jason had been to Vegas once or twice before with family, and he loved it all: the sun, desert, gambling, strip clubs, and the fact that he could drink and smoke indoors. I loved the blue water and green trees of the Northwest and didn't understand his affinity for the desert. He reminded me of his nostalgia for the desert and memories with his grandmother. I also didn't mind gambling or strip clubs, but I wasn't excited about them and certainly wouldn't move somewhere because of them. I had quit smoking about a year prior, so I didn't care that people were allowed to smoke inside. I joked with him that it would cause him to smoke even more frequently. He laughed and said that wouldn't happen, with a slight glint in his eyes alluding the opposite. He was really excited about the move. I could get on board with sunshine, swimming, and cirque shows, as long as I could still frequently see my friends and family. I finally agreed to a compromise. I would apply for a few more jobs and wait to see what happened. If I hadn't heard back from anyone by the end of the week, then I agreed to move. On Wednesday around 1 p.m., Jason heard back from the sales manager in Vegas. They offered him a job in sales. Soon enough, it was Friday. 1 week since they offered me the job. The day had come. I still hadn't heard back from anyone in Seattle or any neighboring cities. I waited until 4 p.m. just in case someone called for an interview. Tick tock, tick tock. At 4, I took a deep breath and another. Finally, I called and accepted the level 3 job. Jason almost bounced off the walls. My hands shook. He barely stopped jumping long enough to notice my fright. He sat by my side and hugged and held me. He reminded me how much we love each other and how much fun we would have. His love made me happy, and after a few minutes in his embrace, I felt supported and relaxed. He excitedly told me, "We're in this together, babe. I know it's going to be hard, but we will get through this together. I believed him. Chapter 4, Warning Signs. Jason and I moved in together after only 3 months of knowing one another. That is incredibly fast, even for most healthy relationships. I knew it was fast, but I was also scared of the gun violence where I lived. So at the time, I felt I was making the best decision for my safety. He and I were spending every night together anyway, so it also seemed appropriate for us in our relationship. This is another warning sign of codependency. I could have found a different apartment by myself, moved in with my family, found roommates. I could have made a variety of different decisions that would have been better, but I was set on my life plan, and that included being in a relationship that I believed held promise for the future. A possible warning sign was that he only played violent video games. He played games with realistic looking people where he scored points for killing them. Just playing those games is not enough of a warning sign, but the fact that he only played those types of games very well could be one. Another aspect to consider here is that he agreed to live with me after only dating for 2 months because I suggested it. Abusers tend to agree with whatever their partner wants in the beginning, so later they can get what they want and possibly use this as a negotiating term. But at the time, I didn't see that anything was wrong. Getting laid off and being forced to either find a job at a different company in the 2009 recession or to move to Las Vegas only made this quick move in decision more complicated. Once Jason heard about the opportunity to move to Las Vegas, he made up his mind. He did not even try to find jobs at home, even though that was what I told him I wanted. He never truly had an open conversation with me about it. He never considered what I wanted, which is another warning sign showing how he was selfish and only cared about himself. I eventually succumbed to his needs and applied for a job in Las Vegas, even though I didn't really want to. I was already feeling codependent and intricately involved in a life with him, so I applied for the job because it was the only solution that would keep us together. Once I got the job, he acted as though the decision was made, except I hadn't made the decision. I literally felt so conflicted that my stomach twisted and turned the same way my mind was. He ignored both my uneasiness and my desires, which was another warning sign of him being selfish. But I loved him and ignored my instincts, even when my body was telling me something was wrong. This is also a warning sign. It seemed easier to be swept up in his infectious joy than to push against it and fight for my own needs. I eventually gave in because I didn't want to be apart from him. I had grown dependent on him for meeting my emotional needs and quote unquote success needs of a relationship. Once I decided I would make the move with him, I ended up doing all the research and setting everything up for our move. He didn't help with any of our moving plans, besides getting a friend to drive us, and he didn't help pack anything. I saw it as him being lazy and perhaps unaware about what needed to be done, but I knew what needed to be done, so I did it. This was also another warning sign about him being selfish. He didn't help and he didn't act like it was a partnership. In a healthy relationship, both partners would discuss their wants, needs, goals, and emotions. Then they would make a decision together. I attempted to have these conversations with Jason, but he dismissed them, and I found it was easier to go along with what he wanted instead of fighting. I didn't realize it at the time. I didn't realize it at the time, but this is when I began slowly losing myself to him. A definite warning sign. Thank you for listening to this episode of Warning Signs. The music in this episode is Skipping Stones by Ian Post. For more about me and my group therapy and workshops, please see my website at www.katemageau.com. The link is in the show notes, and it is spelled www.katemageau.com. And if you can't wait to hear what happens next, you can buy my books on my website. Thank you so much for your support. You can also support me by downloading episodes, as each download gives me a tiny commission. Liking and subscribing also help. Thank you. See you next week.